Right.
the YouTube to director pipeline,
Yeah.
which is basically you're having the new guys kind of come in and take over
Hmm.
Hollywood and the
Right.
box office and
Right.
completely just like turn up the system.
Yeah.
So this year so far, 3 YouTube creators made
Hmm.
their feature film directorial debuts, and
Hmm.
they all bypassed the Hollywood path entirely.
Right.
Kane Parsons built Backrooms, the franchise, from a viral YouTube series that he started at age 16, got A24 to come in, and he just opened at 118 million globally at age 19. He's now A24's youngest director ever and the highest opening weekend for an A24 movie. And Markiplier self-financed Iron Lung at 3 million, distributed it himself and grossed 51 million. And then Curry Barker directed Obsession, which also has been breaking records. And in every, case here, what I've found really interesting is that they all built up an audience for themselves on YouTube and or TikTok before a studio ever got involved. And so basically kind of what, I want to point out here is that like not only is it a way for young people to just kind of speed run how they get into the industry after years of having young directors kind of complain that the traditional film industry runs too much on permission. You have to go to film school, get industry relationships, build up that festival circuit, then get a development deal, and then maybe eventually you direct something. These creators have skipped all that by just
Yeah.
building up an audience,
Yeah.
creating their films, coming up with ideas, getting that financed, and then, coming out, basically, killing all box office numbers. And essentially like de-risking themselves by bringing their audience with them. So all these studios are basically just have an easier decision to make because they're like, well, you've already, built up your audience, right? We're seeing that as well in like the publishing world where like
Yeah.
more and more like, the big publishers want authors to come to them with like their own audience that they've built up on social media, email lists, in order for them to know that like, hey, we have like a steady audience to promote our book to. So it doesn't surprise me that this is happening
Yeah.
for YouTube. I also saw recently they did one of those like Hollywood roundtables where Rachel Sennott is talking about how she basically got plucked from Twitter, where she built up an audience and like became known as like a writer and was able to use that to then catapult into like doing movies and now her own show. And you were talking about this earlier, right? It was like you built up your Twitter audience and then you were able
Yeah.
to kind of parlay that into like your next thing. Now it's like, okay, we have like native digital creators that are building up, their skills by being able to create, video content, and using that to then translate into, what people expect on TV. So I think that's like, something that we kind of need to be keeping an eye out for, as like, people that are joining the industry, is like figuring out like what are these new skills that you can be using to then parlay into something bigger or like where you want to head, is one thing. And then just realizing like what a skill it is, like I think overall for like anybody to be developing these like video skills, where it's like how do you get that hook to bring people in like from the start. Obviously like TikTok and YouTube, like that's all like they focus on, right? Is like those first 3 seconds of like how do you get people to like care about like what you're doing, so I think it's remarkable that like we now have 3 examples of like young people, young men, making their way into,
Uh-huh.
having movies. Have you seen any of these movies? Like, would love to know your thoughts about like, creator to director, pipeline.
Yeah, so I haven't seen these movies in particular yet, but like I love to see that it's happening, right?
Hmm.
I think I saw some of Markiplier's thing, but I didn't. It's on YouTube as well, I think, and
Hmm.
oh, I can't remember, but like I love to see the overall phenomenon, and like I think the
Hmm.
important thing is like this cannot be a thing that turns back. Like we are at the start
Yeah.
of a thing that's just gonna it's just gonna keep going more and more because again, like people who don't think about who have not considered the economics of filmmaking at the large scales. Like it's a big investment to want to make a
Mhm.
large like a big film, right? And like it, there's so much risk involved, and being able to de-risk it by essentially guaranteeing butts and seats, right,
Mhm.
is it just completely changes the equation. And so it really just it's almost like the apple pie the blueberry pie thing again, where when you don't know what pies people want, you have to get the most benign, inoffensive, like, cliche thing that everyone will kind of go see because, oh, it's a famous actor and it's a straightforward story, and everyone, it's high production, blah blah blah, but it's not going to take very big risks, so it's all sequels and blah blah blah. And you could say that, okay, something like Backrooms, for example, it's built off of an organic. It started out as a 4chan thing, and then it just there were like in small indie games exploring it, and it really is like everybody involved in the process of shaping that contributed towards like making it a phenomenon. And same for like 50 Shades of Grey started out as Twilight fan
Right.
fiction, right? Like,
Mhm.
so it is all, and like it's kind of like all the people involved in the in between don't get as much credit. Like, all these young people who are not, I would say they are not encumbered by older people's uh vision of how things are. And here I always love to talk about Jimi Hendrix. The electric guitar was basically invented in 1940 something, 45, 46. Like, he was born around the same time as the instrument, right?
Yeah,
But the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
instrument didn't come of age until he did.
Yeah.
And hypothetically, you could send someone back in time to do what he did 10, 20 years earlier. And this ties like again with the thing we're talking all the way at the beginning about podcasts and Spielberg and whatever. Like, you need the culture to catch up to the technology, right? And
Mhm.
for the culture to catch up, it typically happens with people who were born later, so that they don't inherit the previous assumptions about how you're supposed to do things. So like there are all these assumptions that we have about how cinema is supposed to be, but the like implications and second order effects and all those things, they are to follow through on this, on how those things shake out, and then to go ahead of it and to make movies or to make whatever it is that you make, understanding how the culture changes because of it, that's not easy to do. It might be like conceptually easy in hindsight, but it does involve taking a risk that most people don't have the guts to do, or you might say the naivety or whatever it is, the prerequisites that make someone say, I'm going to make a Backrooms movie, right? Like, lots of people basically have done it, but like, you have to kind of be in the right place at the right time, and you kind of have to throw yourself behind it. Now that people have seen it, again, it's like once one guy ran the 4 minute mile, like a dozen guys ran the 4 minute mile. Right? Now we're gonna have a wave of imitators trying to do similar things, and then there will be like a dumb money throwing cash at the, oh, this is gonna be the next Backrooms, and then it's not, right? It's probably gonna be some of that. But the underlying spirit of the thing, you already said this, you can develop audiences without major, like, before you make your major film or your major documentary or whatever big thing you want to do, you can build an audience with lots of small things, and you get alignment on what they're interested in, and then you can get their buy. It's almost like getting pre-orders in a way, right? Like, you get people to buy into an interesting project that might not be apple pie, right? And so I imagine we're going to see a lot more variety. I want to believe, like, maybe there's some other constraint that's going to emerge. Like, you do get an explosion of diversity in lots of differences, but there's also a centralizing effect that happens, that I think the optimists who are at the frontier of the technology, they tend to be like different deviant weirdos who want to see other weirdos flourish. But like, every YouTube produces its corresponding Mr. Beast. Somebody is gonna figure out like what people want that is, slop. I often use the analogy of Times Square and New York. So much complexity in New York. There's so much, anything you want to find, you can find. But New York also has Times Square, and like, it will always have Times Square, because that's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
where the tourists go. Is a shelling point for the
yeah,
most garish. I enjoyed going to Times Square once. It's like a just wow, holy crap! It's like this incredible aesthetic overwhelm experience. And like, I think similarly, again, when you have podcasts, you're going to have Joe Rogan, which is, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think and again, you can always go looking for any obscure esoteric thing you want. One of my favorite YouTube channels is like I think the Sacramento History Museum, they have like this old guy who's a volunteer who makes newspapers the same way it was made like 100 plus years ago. It's fascinating to watch. And like anybody can do that. And what a lot of people do is they spend their time like in the beginner zone where, okay, first you go to what's most popular, and then if you don't like it, you complain about what's most popular, and then you're just kind of stuck in that very 101 cycle of consuming and complaining about the main thing that the most hyper visible thing that you don't like. But if you actually go looking for what you like, there's now infinite amounts of that, and you can find anything.
So a couple lessons here. So something that this reminds me of, both Steven Spielberg and J.J. Abrams, like getting really into the cameras of their time
Yes.
and learning through that craft to become like the best at what they were doing. And so like it feels like this is that new generation of like, you know, creating things for YouTube and like what audiences want. And it's less about the camera necessarily, but like
Right.
how you're kind of filming what you're doing. And I think we're going to see so much more of this now that, you know, so many more films can be filmed on like Apple phones, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you can just do it more like handheld. Like when you think about the how movies changed when like, you know, cameras went from being like they're down on the ground to like being able to be handheld, and now it's like we're seeing, you know, this change of like you're able to like go more in depth because like you have the iPhone. And I think like now that we have these tools, are like what are these tools that you can be using to like the best of your ability and like learning new skills that take you in the direction that you want to go to, right? This is especially true for like younger you know, younger marketers. And like, I mean, anybody that wants to learn, right? Like one of the interesting conversations that I had last year was with one of the like producers that worked with the Spurs, like how they would create like video content while being like courtside trying to like film, you know, all the plays being done. And I feel like now that like us as audience members are more used to seeing, you know, things like on mobile or like portrait mode. There's this new way of creating like movies that like fit that medium that like wasn't possible before. And I feel like all three of these movies have used that to their advantage to kind of show like, hey, we are of this like art and like know this medium, and like the people that are going to see this movie most is that younger demographic that's used to this a little bit more. So like being able to create art for like the people of your generation is like an avenue for young people to like really go and like not only just assert themselves but like separate themselves from like everybody else who like, you know, is doing things the proper way, going to like film school and doing it, you know, the old school way. So I think there's just so much opportunity here to like go into these mediums and like learn how to like, you know, do something. I do think though that you're also right where it's like we may also get into the territory of like people are just copying other people instead of coming up with like the you know, taking the ideas and run with it, right? Like all three of these I don't know about the Markiplier one, but at least Obsession, right? Like that's based off the monkey pie idea, and then Backrooms is based off of like, you know, that 4chan and like Reddit idea. But at least they went and created like a new story and like you know, in a new medium that isn't just like, you know, on YouTube, you know. So I think like a lesson there is like, you know, you can take, you know, ideas, but then how do you remix them or expand them to like create a, you know, bigger like piece of art that like didn't exist before you know, came to it.
Yeah. When someone creatively violates an assumption like that we didn't know we had, like we all sit up and go, whoa, like that's different. I don't know if there's a simple way to do it. This brings us into like this general creativity territory where you have to be experimenting and um doing silly things. I think is helpful. Like yeah, I think when you get hung up on, oh, I gotta do these like marketing activities, and then it becomes like a chore, and you know itself, you yourself know that you're like fitting this very strict formula. And I mean, which isn't to say that formula doesn't have its place, right? Like, so like you shouldn't necessarily experiment with the interview format or the conversation format and like confuse every viewer with some new style entirely. I think a lot of people can afford to try more strange things a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna throw in as you were talking that another lesson here is that your audience and building that audience matters so much
Yeah.
now. Like that, it's that having your own channel and like way of
Hmm.
speaking to your audience
Right.
and going direct to them
Hmm.
matters so much more because it's like if you are creating this type of content,
Hmm.
it's easier to go direct to them and like put
Right.
it in front of them than like
Right.
trying to go through different distribution channels.